I want to say thank you to the in-kind sponsors who've been working with us. I know I mentioned earlier, the last session, about what it takes for us to really build a movement for change. And it's about focusing on our primary stakeholders. The first stakeholder being our people, and the second stakeholder being our planet. And in order to do that, to co-create a place of climate justice, I want to bring Annie Corver on the stage to speak more about it. Thanks, everyone.
Right now? Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Hi, everyone. I was just thinking that everybody would get up and clap to the left and clap to the right. That was awesome. Well, this is great. Come on inside, everyone. Come on inside. It's so nice to see so many faces. I have been asked to share a little bit of knowledge today about my experience in the Level program, and I know that in, I guess, 2 panels ago, or the last time you were in this room, you learned a little bit about the panel. Does everybody know about the program? Does everybody know about the Level program? A little bit? Okay, sure. Just wait, folks are still coming in. Come on in, I'll just wait to get started. Well, it is a great honor to be here, Tansei. And I've really been inspired as I've been hearing others start in a good way and share with a land acknowledgement. And today we acknowledge that we're in the homelands of the Lenape people. People that have been here. They were displaced in the 17th and 18th century. And it's important to recognize the interconnected relationship that exists and that we have an obligation to respect these lands. I'm grateful in the work that I do with RISE, my organization, that I have opportunities like right now to create connection. It's experiences like this or events like this that we get to meet each other, that we get to spend time in conversation. And as we start in a good way, we do so by acknowledging whose land we're on. So a few of you may have seen me this morning, and a few of you know me. My name is Annie Corver, and I'm a visitor here. I'm joining today from the homelands of the Ktunaxa peoples. The southeast corner of British Columbia, Canada, is known as Fernie, British Columbia. Is anybody a skier in the room? Yeah, so on Sunday we woke up to 6 inches of fluffy white powder as I got in my Subaru and drove to the airport. It's a beautiful place to call home, and I'm grateful for the Indigenous peoples that have stewarded the land that I now call home. I am a Rousseau, I am a Marshall, I am a Deacon, I am a Mason. These are all the names that have come before me. And it's important that I acknowledge that because the people that have shaped me in my life, my family members. When we think about how we've come to be on land, it's important to realize where we've come from or where members of our family have come from. And it really wasn't until about 10 years ago that I started to dig in deeper and better understand my own personal heritage, my own ancestry. And I didn't use the app or the website. I started to have conversations with my family. I was actually completing an MBA at the time at the University of Calgary. And I was studying economics and the intersection between reconciliation and rights and title. And I was doing a lot of work with an energy development in the Wood Buffalo region in Alberta. And so it was really then that I started to better understand the intersection between development and rights, the rights held by Indigenous peoples in Canada. As a child growing up in Revelstoke, I knew that my granny grew up just north of the Red River settlement. I knew that she was a member of the Métis Nation. But other than sort of spending a lot of time muttering in midshift when I was a child, I didn't know a lot about it. And so I'm grateful that over the past decade, I have had a lot of opportunity to learn about the culture of Métis people, to learn about Indigenous peoples. And that learning journey continues today. This summer, actually, I had the chance to go to Winnipeg. Has anyone been, or is anybody from Winnipeg, or have you been to Winnipeg? Usually when you mention that you're going to Winnipeg, people look at you and sort of think, but why? It's a fantastic city, though, and it's the homelands of the Métis Nation in the Red River settlement. And so there we were in the Winnipeg Art Gallery, taking a selfie with our ancestor, and it was so interesting. And through these experiences, I have a better appreciation for where I come from and who I am, and my place, and how that relates to and intersects with the place of others. So in 2013, after finishing my graduate work, I founded Rise Consulting. And I'm doing my best to listen and learn and share, to amplify the voices of others. I'm not an expert. I've been welcomed into this space, and for that I'm grateful. The days are gone when systems, institutions, and society expecting or requiring Indigenous peoples to assimilate, to adapt, and to fit into a dominant culture or organization. And the time has come to challenge the current system, to challenge current structures and organizations our nations have and continue to be extracted from. We've been extracted from in land, in resources, and in children. So let's be less extractive, and let's lean into the knowledge that's being shared with us. At Rise, we're purpose-driven. And I feel really fortunate that 10 years ago when the company was founded, this hasn't changed. But it's over the past 10 years, and just recently, 2 years ago, in getting to know the team at Decade Impact, that I had a better understanding of impact and the opportunity to lean into our values and to really advance our work at Rise inside our own organization and with the clients that we serve. And it was really interesting because as I started to develop the organization and start to grow, I asked a friend of mine, Leah Marie Dorian, to help visualize the values that I held that could then weave into the organization. And I would like to read you her artist statement for this piece. So the value of trust is represented by the parent turtle and the baby turtle. The turtle is a symbol of Mother Earth, and she is the greatest teacher of trust and motherhood. The second value is community, and it has two bison facing each other as if in collaboration mode. The bison are a herd creature and teach us about being a healthy community. The three eagles watch over us, and they teach us to be courageous. An eagle and the bird symbolism teach us to seek the higher vision and purpose in life. The fourth value is shared value, and there are two women loading the canoe and working together to prepare the canoe for voyage. The fifth value is kindness, which is represented by the beautiful sunflowers, which are bright and joyful, reminding us about the important acts of kindness in life. And the final value is represented by the tree, and this one is especially important to me, the tree of knowledge, that Creator teaches us to share knowledge openly. It's not ours to hold on to. There's other aspects of the piece that I don't have time to get into today, but I wanted to chat a little bit about values and the intersection with those values and with the Level program and the work that I'm able to do at Rise. And just last week I had an interview. Brianna and I were on a call with a verifier, and very soon we'll receive our B Corp certification, and I'm so grateful. Thank you. I'm grateful to Brianna and to Andy, to those on my team, and for this invitation. Because it was really an aha moment as I was learning about the reality of our be and our do. And this is so important for all of us. Because our values, our be statements, they show up as do statements. And you have the opportunity to identify how your values intersect with your actions And for me, of course, I have an interest in you doing that as you think about truth and reconciliation. And it was through the Level program that I really learned about outputs and outcome and impact, and that they're very different. That as I think about impact, as we think about impact, we're grounded in reconciliation is relationship, co-creation, centering the voices of Indigenous peoples, thinking about the principles of truth and reconciliation. You know, in Canada, we're guided by 10 principles. Principle number 5 is to close the socioeconomic gap that exists. So the work that we do at RISE and the work that we do on our team, we might have outputs and outcomes along the way, but the impact exists daily. And the long-term impact that exists is where we get to see changes in systems, changes in structures. And so Creator has called on me. I'm a vessel for this work, and I'm grateful that I've had an opportunity to share with you and that you're also part of the B Corp community. So thank you for the invitation and enjoy the session.
Please enjoy this video.
Climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our time, and all businesses have a role to play in helping address it. At B-Lab US and Canada, we believe that all businesses have a role to play in responding to the climate emergency, and that they can best do so by grounding their climate action in justice. Climate justice recognizes that the people who are least responsible for climate change are the ones that are suffering its most devastating effects. Globally and in the US and Canada, these populations are disproportionately people of color and systematically oppressed communities. In order to truly advance climate justice, it is essential that companies take action and develop climate transition plans that are informed by the leadership and perspectives of people and frontline communities who are most impacted by climate change. B-Lab US and Canada is designing tools, resources, and peer-to-peer opportunities for learning and strategizing. We've also engaged in an exploration with frontline community representatives and climate justice experts, asking for their input on the role that business can and should play in advancing climate justice and where they think we should take this work next. Here are some of what they had to share.
How do you apply racial equity specifically to your climate action work? We know that their greatest impact will be on lower income regions. We know that they will have intergenerational impacts, and this affects women and children the most. And then also shifting the paradigm to who holds the power in these conversations and who's leading these conversations.
When you look at the numbers of those that stand to be impacted, it makes good business sense in the sense that if we do nothing, it inevitably is going to create negative effects on how business is done. This is our workforce, right, that's being affected. Addressing climate justice now makes a business proactive.
Our investment in climate change mitigation has accomplished little, and our efforts to limit its impact have fallen short. Yet there is a solution: focusing on climate justice. The business case for climate action is irrefutable, and the only way to solve climate change is to address it through an equity lens, to center the frontline communities most effective, to listen to the wisdom within those communities, and to work with them to create a sustainable future. A climate justice lens strengthens current and new climate action initiatives to be more effective and efficient. The health of the people and the planet will improve, and business opportunities will increase, climate-related costs will lessen, and our resilience will grow. We're on a learning journey, and we invite you to join us.
Please welcome to the stage Cynthia Estremera Gaudier, Salim Chapman, and Farmer C.
Mic check, mic check. Hello, everyone. Hello. Well, I have the privilege and honor of being on this stage and engaging in this conversation with Farmer C, the Clarenda Stanley, dope CEO, founder of Green Heifer Farms, the nation's first certified B Corp Black-owned farm. And daughter of the ancestors, Alabama born and North Carolina bred. I'm also humbled to be with Salim Chapman, Philly's first Chief Resilience Officer, urban climate justice advocate, West Philadelphia born and raised. And both are activists and dreamers of environmental justice. I am merely a cog in the machine. I'm the Director of Racial Equity and Engagement at Strategy Arts, and I lead our equitable community engagement work and have had the privilege of working alongside some organizations that are doing incredible climate justice work on the ground. And so I'm excited to be, thank you. I'm excited to be in dialogue with all of you today, those of you who are coming in virtually, those of you who are here in person, and then to be engaging in this conversation. And we have a lot to cover in 35 minutes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set the stage for us just to do a little bit of framing. I think Kylie, Raj, and C did a great job of just setting the stage for what our conversation is gonna be like today as well. So in Philadelphia, many of you know or don't know that your zip code determines your life expectancy. At Strategy Arts, we've learned this and felt this deeply as we support initiatives at the Department of Public Health and other organizations that are working to solve societal issues. Black and brown people suffering from systemic racism and inequitable practices and policies are more likely to be plagued by poverty, experience chronic health conditions, are exploited for their labor, and are now experiencing the harshest impacts of climate change. Among many other things, historical redlining, housing discrimination based on race, which led to divestment in Black and brown neighborhoods in more than 100 American cities, has been researched and found that it has placed a heavier burden on residents from extreme heat than other communities. For example, in Philly's Hunting Park section, while the difference can be as much as 20 degrees hotter in that neighborhood than other neighborhoods. While in Philly's Nicetown section, Black children living there are subject to the highest rates of asthma hospitalization in Philadelphia. So we literally cannot breathe. Study after study has long indicated that people of color face disproportionate risks from pollution and climate injustice, and polluting industries are often located smack dab in the middle of our communities. So, coined by Black American activist Dr. Benjamin Franklin Chavis, environmental racism is a form of systemic racism whereby communities of color are disproportionately burdened with health hazards through policies and practices, or any policy, practice, or directive that differentially affects or disadvantages individuals, groups, or communities by race. And this can be on the government level, this can be on the business level. It doesn't matter. It's a policy or practice that differentially disadvantages people. As a result, these communities suffer greater rates of health problems, and they shoulder the burden of laboring in harmful environments to provide financially for their families. Even more frail is the situation of Black and brown migrants who are surviving through catastrophic climate-related events globally. And then they migrate to American cities seeking safety and asylum in the same neighborhoods killing our communities. At the front lines, it seems clear that one cannot combat climate change without addressing racism. One cannot get at the root of environmental injustice without explicitly tackling racial and economic injustice. In both your work, how do you address climate justice and environmental racism? And I'll pose it to C and then Salim.
Right. So for me, being a Black woman farmer in the South, I don't have the privilege of not addressing environmental injustice and environmental racism and climate justice. I'm an environmental fundraiser by training, so I've had the experience of looking at the conversation regarding environmental conservation, philanthropy, as well as environmental justice from a grander scale. And I will tell you, it is disheartening
It is heartbreaking in many ways because we can't even have a conversation about climate justice until you're ready to talk about the collective justification that continues to exist and many people must be complicit in for us to still be having these same conversations. There is no climate justice because we have not dealt with climate racism. And before we can deal with climate racism, we have to deal with environmental racism, but we can't have that conversation until we can come to a clear understanding that there is not the same valuation placed on every single member of our species. If I come to you and I say to you, does your company have a statement, an anti-racist statement that you have put into practice? Some of you may say, yes, we have been bold enough to actually use the terminology anti-racist. If I come to you and I say, is it specifically addressing anti-blackness? For many of you, your immediate response is, well, what about? And the conversation is not a but, all right? That's not the conjunction we need to focus on, it's and. You need to address your issues with Black people and. And we can continue on and have more further discussion. But I'll stop there.
Well, I don't know how I follow or add anything on to that. But what I will say is, you know, for me, it's always really interesting being on these platforms, and I'm really lucky to be here, to be invited to speak today. But I often say, you know, Cynthia mentioned in my intro that I'm a West Philadelphia native, and I don't say anything different now than what I said many years ago when I was growing up in West Philadelphia. It's just that it resonates differently because I have a fancy title behind my name. And so when we think about how we really need to be engaging on these issues, we need to go to those communities who are experiencing these issues, because what I always say is that those communities have dealt with existential threats for generations. And so when we think about how we harvest resilience, when I think about how I think about moving resilience forward in the city of Philadelphia, those are the communities that I'm first seeking out. And how we try to do it here is really looking at the issue of place. So in Philadelphia, as Cynthia also sort of talked about in the opening, you know, zip code determines your life expectancy. And what we often see is that there's a direct correlation between the communities that are sort of experiencing significant climate risk in the future and some sort of racialized policymaking that was done in the past. So our most heat vulnerable communities have experienced redlining. Our most flood vulnerable communities have experienced urban renewal and the racialized implications of that. And so when we think about how we move this work forward in the future, we have to look to the past and resolve some of those injustices that we haven't been able to sort of reconcile with. And so what I think about is how do we situate ourselves in place and really think about how we harvest the knowledge that has been developed in community over generations that's respectful of its history, its current condition, and its self-created future of resilience, right? So it's not me as a government institution coming in and saying, here's what I know is best, or here's what I think is best for you to do. It's that how am I an enabler and an activator of your vision for resilience, and that's how we sort of try to apply it here.
Great, Salim. I think that one, yeah, please clap. I think that what I think is really interesting about the framing that you both gave and how you address this in your work is thinking about where you come from in place, in your social location, and where does that show up? And I know you talked a little bit about resiliency, and we could talk a lot about resiliency within the Black community, right? But I think part of the issue, I think right now in this framing of climate justice is too often that it's whitewashed, right? It's disentangled from the sources that it should impact most, and those most marginalized in our systems and those most vulnerable to climate change. And so though it often feels like a daunting task, what do you think businesses should know or immediately do to begin rectifying climate injustices in their own communities? And also, how do you think this is showing up in our own communities?
Okay, that's a full question.
Sorry.
She's like, I'm getting it all in, okay. So, you know, the challenge before they can address the climate injustices that occur are to deal with the climates that you create at your own companies. Some of you can't care about your communities because you don't care about your colleagues. And you don't understand that they're dealing with the challenges of having to work with some of you every single day. And yet, when they step outside the threshold of their offices, then they have to step into a society where they're also having to constantly have resiliency. See, we don't have a choice about being resilient. Either you're going to be resilient or you're going to be destroyed, basically. And so in the agricultural space, specifically, I will say that one of the challenges for me as a farm, I had to have, went through considerable challenges, walked into a bank with an 800 plus credit score, 30% down, even though 25% was all that was required, and I was denied. And the only reason I became undenied, because miraculously they figured something out, was because I asked to see where are your funds going to socially disadvantaged farmers that I know you're receiving funding from for the federal government. And because they could not come back to me with data to help support their decision, I was able to go ahead and get a loan. But I resented giving them my money. I resent paying them every single month because you didn't want me as a customer. You didn't appreciate me as a customer. So if you're able to get through that and be able to acquire some land, because of course 99% of all farmland is owned by white farmers, and no disrespect to white farmers, but you don't have 99% because you're the best. You have 99% because you have established systems that have made it possible for you to have 99%. But me, with my small, matter of fact, there's so few black farmers, we don't even have a decimal point in the USDA census. For me to be able to acquire a farm and say, hey, I want to do what's best for the environment, well, that requires capital. And we already can see the challenges to that capital. Now, for many, maybe they do cut corners. Are they cutting corners because they don't have a love for the land? No, they're cutting corners because you've created systems that don't give them any other choice if they want to participate in the agricultural landscape. So for me, having to constantly figure out how to be a good person is amazing. And the fact that to be a conscientious business, I have to be able to find the rooms where you're having the meetings because you're not inviting me. You're not recruiting me. I'm not the person that you're gonna invest in. I'm not the person that you're gonna think about when it's time to have any type of partnership. You don't even have my tea in your break rooms. Right? So for many, it is so difficult for them to focus on community because they have not created that community internally. And for others of us who are all about community, we're constantly trying to figure out how to support our community despite the challenges that you place. So long story short, I don't know how they can figure that out because they've got some other stuff they need. The companies, you got some other stuff you need to figure out.
Yeah, I'm not going to be much help either. 'Cause I don't know if I had an answer.
Just laying it all out there.
Yeah, just being honest. But obviously I don't work for a business. I work for government. But what I can say is I'm all about institutions and changing institutions. So when I came back this is my second tenure in city government, and when I came back 4 years ago, my mission wasn't to sort of come and develop this amazing policy that would transform communities. My mission was to transform the way that government operates. None of our institutions are set up to respond to the way that individuals experience problems or issues or to set them up for success. And so what we have to think about is that how do we better condition how we show up in a way that actually meets real needs? So when I think about businesses, I think about you can't think about starting a business without thinking about wealth inequities and what's that tied into. And when we think about climate and we know that for communities of color, oftentimes your home, your primary residence, not a second vacation home, your primary residence is your primary source of wealth. Well, for a lot of these communities, they're at significant risk for climate change. So when you think about your home no longer being insurable because it's at risk for flooding, or you're in a location that someone doesn't want to buy into because it has significant risk from heat, whether you're talking about housing unaffordability because you can't actually afford to stay in your home because you can't afford the energy costs. So when I think about here in Pennsylvania, it's really interesting because our social safety net for energy issues is actually diminishing over time because it's actually only set up for you to get assistance for your heating needs. So as we're having milder winters and warmer summers, that social safety net for a lot of our households is actually diminishing over time. So I think that that's an opportunity for businesses to step in that space, but also to step back. So what I think about is who are you competing with for resources, for contracts? Who could you be investing in? Who could you sort of be mentoring to actually create a pathway to actually creating sort of wealth and business creation for yourselves? These are all ways that I think businesses could take a step forward, but I'll just end on this because I have the heavy task of really thinking about sort of how the city of Philadelphia shows up in these issues. And I'll be honest to say, we cannot do it alone, right? Government cannot do it alone. And that's not just me absolving us of our responsibilities, but the reality is that it was a collective effort that got us into this place. And so it's gonna have to be a collective resolve that gets it out of it.
Interestingly enough, it sounds like some of you, some of your offerings revolved around what does this look like internally to sort of be inside your organization or inside government to really dismantle the systems that have been put into place that have kept you out from getting loans, that have kept people out from using their homes to be able to generate intergenerational wealth, right? Like there's ways in which it sounds like internally the structures that have been created are the ones that now need to be dismantled or looked at or evaluated so that you can understand which policies and practices are contributing to these things, and that this has to be a collective issue, right? So if there hadn't been that, mandate for that bank to do that work and to particularly invest in certain communities and in certain enterprises, then you wouldn't have been able to hold them accountable to that. Or if there hadn't been the energy resources provided for families that are struggling, then families would be out of their homes because they would have to be able to go somewhere else, or they'll put a lien on their homes. And so I think in the context of businesses, when you're thinking, I know that there was probably some panels earlier about businesses generating wealth for families, because when we're talking about racial justice and climate justice, we're also talking about economic justice. There's another layer, y'all. Right? You need to be able to have opportunities to build wealth for families so that way they can exit out of intergenerational poverty and that they can then become profitable, successful, and thriving. And so I know that you are looking at this in your own family pharmacy and how you've generated a business model that's sustainable, not just for the environment, but for your family as well. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit.
Sure. So I'll just touch on that as it relates to families who are building a portion of their wealth through agricultural production. Our lands are experiencing greater and more common floods. We're dealing with droughts. Many of us do not have the green infrastructure in place in order to protect our soils. We often are not insured adequately for our lands, and the more the land is affected by climate change, the less desirable it becomes. We have challenges putting the measures in place to be able to be more climate resilient. We're shut out of the carbon market. We don't make money off of offsets or off of credits because we don't meet your scale. And so when you have these compounding issues and your livelihood is your land, it leaves you in a position of desperation many times. Farmers have one of the highest suicide rates of any industry, and it is particularly high when it comes to Black, brown, and indigenous families, who this is not only land often for them, but it is part of their history. And for Black people whose history was interrupted, for us to be connected to land for generation to generation is a part of our family tree. And when that's ripped from you through practices such as tax sales, eminent domain, et cetera, and all of the other challenges that I've mentioned, then it makes, for many, agriculture or any type of agrarian background unappealing and unappetizing. It makes it more challenging to pass land, if you're able to maintain it, down to the next generation who sees it as a burden oftentimes because they saw the strife that grandma and granddaddy went through in order to be able to even maintain it. For me, I try to be an example to farmers aspiring and current of entrepreneurship and try to educate other businesses as well that that's what I am. I produce for our own line of products that are on shelves. We're a business. My agricultural entrepreneurship is no different than a tech startup in that sense, and trying to educate also the future, hopefully, group of farmers, and knowing that there are entrepreneurial possibilities and opportunities in the agricultural space. Because as a farmer, it is very challenging, especially if you're a small-scale farmer, to have a quality of life that is dignified purely on production. Again, we don't have the scale, so we have to create brands in order to keep our land. And that is the message that I try to impart. Now, for me, our motto at my farm is we grow slow so we don't owe. I have an issue. And there's a couple of parts to that. We don't want to owe environmentally, we don't want to owe consciously, we don't want to owe spiritually, and we try not to owe financially. Because for us, equity, we focus on one of the definitions of equity that often get lost, because in business, when we're talking equity, we're talking about dollars, right? The way your current model is set up, if I were interested in taking on some investors, that means that I and my Black family have to go out into our fields that we had to jump over many obstacles to acquire, to work hard, to grow and produce, because there is going to be someone who is expecting an ROI off of our sweat. I'm a grandmother of 5. I am teaching my grandchildren to be employers, not employees. So for us, we don't want to have that burden because it puts us at a disadvantage to be able to grow without having to figure out a way to make someone else's productivity goal. It's challenging to be a farming family, to develop wealth in that manner. And I hope that collectively the B Corp community, being as regenerative agriculture seems to be one of the primary priorities for many of you companies, I would hope that you would partner with businesses such as mine so that we can have that wealth creation and have less disparities in that space.
Thank you, Pharmacy.
I mean, you don't even need me up here. I can just listen to you talk all day. I mean, come on. You know, I want to be, I'm so inspired and have so much gratitude to be up here sharing this space with you because I'm actually a descendant of a Black farmer. But I mention that because it was never even talked about or thought about it being sort of something that was passed down or a wealth creation mechanism for my family. The farm was sold long before I was even born. And we only maintain a little plot of land. And wealth creation is not something that is talked a lot about, particularly in terms of ownership and employing, individuals. And I never even considered starting a business as sort of a pathway for myself. And so I think that when we think about these conversations and how we connect it to sort of more systemic structures, even someone like myself who had this connection with farming, who had this connection with sort of being able to generate your own wealth, never even talked about it, never even thought about it, was never even educated about it in the spaces that I was in. And so I just wanted to sort of appreciate that from a personal note in terms of the honor to be here with you. And in terms of your question, in terms of how we invest in historically disadvantaged communities, I certainly think the pathways to investing in businesses like yours, right? Because when I think of investing, I get scared because it is sort of centered on that ROI paradigm. And I think about what has gotten us into this crisis in the first place. It's a culture based upon commodification. It's a culture based upon control, over usurping some sort of authority, whether over people or nature. And so when we think about the risks we're supposed to see from climate change, I think a lot about climate gentrification, right? And we see that happening a lot in Miami, where, you know, the individuals who 10, 15 years ago was buying beachfront property are now moving more inland, and now sort of the lower wealth communities is now beachfront because they know what's coming. And when I think about here in Philadelphia, we, surprisingly, we actually are at less risk for climate impacts than New York or DC. So I always say, you know, instead of us being a weekend stop for people as they ride the Amtrak from New York to DC, you might call it more permanent home. You might think about locating your businesses here. The Commerce Department would be mad at me if I didn't say that. But I mentioned that to say that, you know, we're projected to see an influx in people moving here.
Right.
And what does that do for our communities in terms of destabilizing them?
Yes.
And so what we really have to think about is not just how we are investing in these communities, but how are we empowering these communities to be a place that I said earlier that is within the culture of that community. I'll tell you a quick story. You know, gentrification is an issue here in Philadelphia, as it is in a lot of major cities. And, you know, for us, you know, I always walk around the city and see that neighborhood is called something different than what I remember when I was a kid. And that's just a total disregard for the cultural history of that community. And so what we have to do is really think about how we are acclimating ourselves and ingratiating ourselves to these places and really trying to sort of be allies and uplift what has been there rather than sort of seeking to be extracted from it.
That's a perfect way to think about it, Salim, because I think that, you know, I live in Kensington. I've been there my whole life, and I think that part of what we're starting to see is sort of the influx of gentrification that's coming over from some of the other nearby areas of like Northern Liberties and Fishtown, and that there are folks that have been living there for 40, 50 years that are being displaced in this process, right? And then you have this extra layer of what you talked about where, you know, we have family members in the Dominican Republic and Haiti and Puerto Rico who are coming over because of climate crises in their own, you know, spaces, right? And so now they're migrating to our spaces, and like you said, there's a destabilization without adaptation from American cities in terms of thinking about how do we allow this to be a space where we're not only addressing systemic racism that's happening with the residents that are here, but people that are coming in that need to seek safety. How do you use that as a sort of a vehicle or a mechanism to think about the way that you want to function with your business? How do you think about engaging your sustainability strategy by engaging communities that you're serving or engaging communities that you're working with? So I know that, you know, final question is, you know, according to Deloitte's Global's 2021 Climate Check Report, 80% of business execs are concerned about climate change, while 65% of them said they had to cut back on environmental sustainability initiatives in some way due to the pandemic. So, don't know where that lies, right? But in terms of like closing this out, we're talking to a room full of businesses. What should we be doing differently as a business? Like, what's one thing, one step that we should take to just start thinking differently about how this is impacting the communities that we're serving and the communities that are, you know, really serving us because they're engaging in our businesses?
You want to go first this time?
I know that's a hard.
Why now? No, happy to. No, you know, I think it's a really, really great question, and you know, I think about this. I love groups that want to talk about heavy topics like climate change and racial justice at the end of the day, because you all are my type of people.
Yeah.
You know, and folks often ask me what keeps me coming to work every day. And I say it's the opportunity to create a reality that we've never manifested, that we never even fully thought about before, much less actualized. And so as a business, we're trying to do a really difficult thing. We're trying to address historical inequities while at the same time prepare communities for the future. Right. And when I say prepare communities for the future, I don't just mean addressing climate impacts and making sure that we're creating stabilization. I mean putting them on a path where they were better off than where they started before. I often tell my colleagues, what are we sustaining? Because if it's the status quo, I have no interest in being a part of it. So my advice to you as businesses is that keep doing what you're doing and take it to the next level. You are already forging a new path. You looked at the status quo as business could be done, and you said that wasn't for me. I imagined something better. I hope that you continue to take that ethos, not only apply it to your business, but apply it to everything you do in life. And in that way, I feel very optimistic about what we'll be able to accomplish.
See? Yeah. I want to follow that. So for me, in order to provide any type of advice regarding rectifying environmental and climate injustice, my first piece of advice to businesses would be to get real honest with yourselves. If supporting environmental justice and supporting climate justice efforts causes some concern because you feel that your employees may feel a certain kind of way about that, you feel that your customers may feel a certain kind of way about that, you feel your shareholders may feel a certain kind of way about that, you need to be honest about why that is causing them any discomfort. I'll give you a hint. It starts with R, okay?
The big one.
Let you fill it in. Because there should not be discomfort when it comes to having a conversation about environmental and climate justice. Secondly, ask yourselves why supporting those efforts is even a choice for you. As a B Corp, you are held to a higher standard and expectation. So the same way you expected me to meet your metrics as a member of a systemically excluded community, I'm going to tell you, you have to meet mine. I don't understand how it's a choice in the first place. I don't understand how it comes to being something that's determined by a profit and loss statement, because what happens, who profits if we lose the planet? And that is what's going to eventually happen. Money will no longer have value. Water may be your future currency. If that's the case, where are you going to be? Oh, that rhymed.
Hey.
Bars. But in all seriousness, and also look at who you're giving money to, right? I'm an environmental fundraiser by training, and I have gotten 7, 8, even 9-figure gifts for some of the most ridiculous things in the world. You know, I could go in and say the spiny back, stickleback or whatever, because I actually raised money for this, what is it, the spiny? I don't know, it was a fish, all right? It was easier for me to get money for this fish than it is for me to get money to put in black farmers' pockets. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why are you giving money to support climate justice and environmental justice to people who have not experienced it? To people who have no lived experience being in a community that is being continuously and consistently left out of many conversations. And then lastly, I will tell you, inviting me to your table is not enough, okay? I'm gonna come with questions. Who set the agenda? Why wasn't I invited to that conversation? Who owns the building, all right? Who decided that these should be the snacks? We need to have those kind of conversations if you want me to show up to your meeting. Expand your idea of co-creation.
And I'm happy to say that if y'all need some help with meeting guidelines and co-creation, you could just holler at me, okay? I just think that this was an amazing conversation. I wanted to close by saying that I know that there are some additional conversations happening tomorrow around climate injustice. And so feel free to drop in on those conversations. I'll be hosting one as well. But really, I wanted to cite two quotes. The first one is from climate activist Vanessa Nakate. And she said, "We cannot have climate justice if the voices from the most affected communities are continuously cropped out." And those of you who may know who she is know why she said that quote. I'll also end and offer Salim's own words from his speech when he won the Sustain PHL Award. Quote, "We do not simply look at the way the world is and why, but that we look at the way the world should be and ask why not." And it's been a deep pleasure sharing this space with all of you. Deep gratitude for all of your continued perseverance in pursuit of justice.
Thank you.
Here to bring us on home, welcome Scott Wheeler and Brian Murray.
All right. How's Philly treating you guys? What? All right, let me try this. How about those Eagles? All right, I had to do that because I cannot be in a meeting in Philadelphia without hearing about the Eagles, because we don't really know why they're winning, so we got to be careful. So I'm Scott Wheeler. I am the chair of Be Local Philly. It is really great to see all your faces. I wish I could see all the faces out there behind the camera. We had a lot of people on camera today. I don't know how many of them have gone to dinner right now. They might be getting a little tired of watching their screens. I know you guys are getting ready to, I think, have a little party tonight, so that's good. And so we'll tell you a little bit about that. It's really great to see all of you here. As one of the very first B Corps, it's pretty amazing to see the number of people here and the number of people that are first-timers at our Champions Retreat. It's really amazing, and it's just great to stand up here and see all of you. I remember, when we started, we couldn't even fill up the first row, so it's pretty amazing to be a part of a movement that has grown to this kind of an impact. So thanks, everybody, for that. I did want to just kind of set the stage for some of the things tonight, and I also wanted to address a little bit about how we here in Philadelphia do our Be Local a little bit differently. And for those of you that have been in conversations with me in the Be Local community, you always know that I say, we focus more on collective action. We may not be as far along on some of the metrics of Be Locals, but yet we've had tremendous results on impact here in Philadelphia. And it's because of the community we come from and the community we're part of. So one of our fellow B Corps, PWP Video, has actually put together a great video, at least in my humble opinion. We'll let you guys be the judge of that, to give you a little context for why we do things the way we do and the way we approach collaboration here in Philly. So roll the video.
When the global B Corp movement sprung from the Philadelphia area in 2006, impact had already been in the region's water for a long time. Pennsylvania was founded as a Quaker colony. Despite being established on homelands where Lenni Lenape people lived thousands of years, the Quakers worked to infuse social consciousness into the region by being the first group to protest slavery starting in the colonial period. Philadelphia was born at the confluence of the Delaware and Schuylkill rivers, and the port city attracted one of the earliest entrepreneurial innovators, Benjamin Franklin. He was as focused on community infrastructure as he was on international trade. Reverend Richard Allen founded the first independent Black denomination in the U.S. At Mother Bethel AME Church, Allen hosted abolitionists, Black businessmen, and thought leaders from across the country, becoming the first president of the American Society of Free Persons of Color in 1830. The region boomed during the Industrial Revolution, and while that era promoted economic prosperity for some, businesses started to create intractable social, cultural, and environmental problems to be solved. Starting in 1962, Reverend Dr. Leon Sullivan worked to build prosperity by raising capital within the African American community. Those investments built Progress Plaza, the first shopping center in the nation developed, managed, and continuously owned by African Americans. His crusade of improving quality of life for communities through the global Sullivan principles of corporate social responsibility had international ripples and influence. Judy Wicks's White Dog Cafe became known for environmental sustainability and community engagement. In her home above the cafe, Judy started Fair Food, the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia, and Ballet. The very first certified B Corp, Untours, based in Delaware County, created the Untours Foundation to use their profits to seed more impact businesses. And Philadelphia-based Halloran Philanthropy stepped up to help fund the Startup B Lab. Today, the region's impact ecosystem is becoming increasingly connected and collaborative. Local nonprofit Impact PHL is partnering with SOCAP to host the Total Impact Summit annually in Philadelphia. Mom Your Business committed to mentoring 1,000 Black female entrepreneurs in 2 years. And the American Sustainable Business Network's largest cohort of impact angel investors is in Philadelphia. Whether past, present, or future, the water is what connects the Philadelphia region. These ripples of impact are still being felt today. They've brought us all to this event on this day in this moment. Where will the ripples carry you from here?
So as you can see, we stand on the shoulders of a lot of people that have been working on impact for a long time here in Philadelphia. And we have a lot of organizations here that have been working a long time before B Lab started. And so we've continued that today, and we continue to build deeper relations that allow us to do a lot. We do hope, and we have an opportunity tonight, we've invited a lot of the people in our ecosystem to be at Macon North for you to learn about. And if you were at the Financing Impact Businesses panel earlier, you met some of those organizations. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute. But Brian, first, I think we're having a little party at your place tonight.
That's right, Scott. We're headed to Kensington tonight. It is actually only about 15 minutes away from train or car, but if anybody took the buses last night, that took 25 minutes to go 5 blocks. I'm hoping it's less than 30 minutes to get out there. And tonight will be very different than the Franklin Institute, but I hope it will also be a very kind of rich and deep Philadelphia experience. We're opening up 120,000 square feet of former industrial space that is currently filled with entrepreneurs, change makers, nonprofit leaders, artisans, and craftspeople. Some of those include Green Line Capital that provides microloans for immigrant businesses across the city. Another is the Kensington Corridor Trust, which is the first neighborhood trust in the country that is buying real estate on behalf of the community and for the community. It also includes Damon Bain, who I don't know if he's in the room, but his artwork is right out of this room. And also we have a bunch of food entrepreneurs, including a group called Kismet Bagels. So at the end of this conference, when you think about Philadelphia, I want you to think about the Eagles. I want you to think about cheesesteaks, water ice, and now I want you to think about Philadelphia and bagels. That's my plan. So the building is named Macon Studios, which is a moniker for Made in Kensington. This area was once the textile capital of the world. And although this building is not a textile building, it was formerly a candy company. There was a candy factory, the Richardson Mint Company, which is still in business but is no longer in Philadelphia. It was abandoned for decades, and our renovation helped bring in 500 jobs, 80+ entrepreneurs. And this is really what we do. We invest in businesses, in people, in buildings and in life, and we really try to invest in and with communities, really at the core of what Shift does. So the neighborhood. Kensington is the home of multi-generational families. It is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city of Philadelphia. It is also home to an enormous young and youth population as well. It is also the home of probably the largest open drug market in the country. As we take the buses there, we're going to traverse under the elevated train Kensington Avenue, where we will pass through the Kensington Avenue Commercial District, which is probably one of the most challenged commercial districts that you will ever see. I say that to specifically ground everyone in the realities of what cities like Philadelphia are working through right now. And also to really emphasize is as you walk into this building and you get to meet these entrepreneurs, you'll understand that these entrepreneurs chose to be in Kensington. And I think that will really kind of ground. Well, first off, we don't have any other B Corps in the building yet, but I think the spirit of the B Corp community is definitely going to be felt when you meet some of these entrepreneurs. So we have about 40 to 50 entrepreneurs, leaders, nonprofit organizations that will be joining us. The building is 5 floors. We have an event space on the top that has great views of the city. The event is meant to spread out, to explore, to be adventurous. My only request is that you take some time to meet some of these incredible people that are showing up with the building. They're so excited to be hosting you all. We have just incredible people there. And I really think that that's where the magic is going to be with this event tonight. So we're really excited to host you and look forward to seeing you all soon. And back to Scott.
Thanks. So I think what Brian was saying, and I'm going to say too, is your work at Learning is not done just because we're going to have a party. So there's a lot of people there that have done a lot of work to get ready for you. And we also have, as I said earlier, a lot of the impact businesses that are in our organizations in the city that are going to be there for you to continue conversations with. So we have a slide, I think, that we were going to put up. There we go. So you've probably seen this chart down at the bottom of the escalator. So this is a partial map of the business impact ecosystem here in Philadelphia. And there's 2 parts to it. Those that are financing impact businesses and supporting the startups, and those that are creating the ecosystem of basically how we all support each other. And so at Macon North tonight, just off the side of our main party room and near probably the bar that's going to be less crowded, for those of you that just want to know that, we're going to have a bunch of groups there. So we're going to have the Circle of Aunts and Uncles, and we're going to have All Together Now PA together. They are Judy Wicks's newest organizations. And for those of you that don't know Judy Wicks, you saw her mentioned in the video. She is the godmother of impact everywhere in this country. She started the Sustainable Business Network that spread around the country to other sustainable business networks. Bally went national. And a lot of the B Corps came out of her first SBN, a lot of our first B Corps. She's still doing new organizations and still making changes. Assets, which is a CFI in Lancaster that happens to use the B assessment in their lending and gives reduced interest rates for certifying as a B Corp. We found out about that because we were sitting here in Philadelphia going, why is Lancaster getting more B Corps than Philadelphia? They get a financial deal for it, right? So we have the Untours Foundation. First B Corp, when Hal passed away, the company went to Untours Foundation. And so that company now operates underneath the foundation, and that foundation operates solely to invest in impact businesses. The Sustainable Business Network, you might want to ask about how we are the only city that gets a tax break for being B Corps. Some of you might want to think about how we did that. Mom Your Business, we already talked here earlier. She was in the video. She has committed to helping start 1,000 Black woman-owned entrepreneurs in the next 2 years. We're going to do our best to help her and support her in that. Investors Circle from the American Sustainable Business Network, impact investors, equity investors. We have the largest group of impact investors in the entire national network for ASBN here in Philadelphia. And then last but not least, Impact PHL and Ben Franklin Technology Partners. Impact PHL was set up by Ben Franklin to be the centerpiece for how we coordinate our impact organizations in the city and bring greater amounts of capital into the impact community. And then Ben Franklin Technology Partners is long known as one of the hubs for bringing in technology businesses that create good businesses and good jobs in the region. So they'll all be there to share their experiences, to answer your questions. and to have a drink with too. So let me move to the logistics for tonight, and then we can get you guys out of here. And I'm going to need that slide because I don't want to say this wrong. So there we go. Okay, so at 5:30 p.m. tonight, we're going to start. The first coach is going to leave to Macon North. There's a lot of people to move, right? So try to make sure that we get there so we can fill up these buses and get moving. It's 55 at a time. They're going to be coming back here afterwards. So you can get coach up to Kensington and back, and they'll be dropping you off right at the door. What we want to remember here is that some of you, I don't know how many, probably many of you, will want to go to the after party afterwards. That's going to be hosted by Triple Bottom Brewing. That's one of our B Corps here, so I encourage you to go and say hello. So the buses will drop you off there, and then there will be transportation set up to get you back here. We have some guests invited from outside the community. So these impact organizations that we talked about have had the opportunity to invite guests to be with us. They're not B Corps. Some of them may not even know about the B Corp movement. So welcome them. Find them out, welcome them, and make sure they're a part of our community. And then one last reminder, right? We are in an urban environment. So be aware of your surroundings. Don't go places you don't know about. And if you have a question, ask somebody that knows the neighborhood and make sure you stay safe. So we will see you all at Macon Studios, and thanks all for being here today. It has been a tremendous and wonderful day. And did I tell you guys, you all look great, so thank you.